show, which is starting right now. So, hey, folks, welcome to the pre show. We got Wendy on the other line. She's trying to make something work here. So, hey, Romeldian, good to see you. So, we're going to start this broadcast in less than a minute now. And Wendy's having some tech issues over on her end. Oh, that's my feedback coming. There we go. That's off. And Wendy will be here when she can get in here. So, Wendy, I'm going to take the call down. So you let me know what's going on. Bye, baby. Baby. I just called her baby. Oh, there we go. Hey, Roy, good to see you. Carlene, good to see you. Michelle, good to see you. Oh, there she is. Boom. There you are.
Well, I'm trying to get in. Let's put it that way.
Well, now I got to make you go dark because we're going to get started. Stand by, everyone. Hey, folks, happy Tuesday evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. Hey, Wendy.
Hello.
It's sure good to see you. We've had some tech problems. Only
We're
this
still
time.
having some tech problems, darling. We're still having some tech problems.
So she has had to join us via phone today.
Yes.
For this, if you don't know where you are, this is the Robertson broadcast. And this is what we do every Tuesday at this time of day. 4 o'clock here in the afternoon in Wisconsin, Central America. Not Central America, Central United States, North Central United States. And we've got Wendy over there live from London, England, that is. Swimming pools, movie stars.
Oh, I wish, darling. I wish.
And so, hey, don't I know you? Aren't you like some famous anchor on some famous show somewhere?
Apparently, I look like one. So
You get a lot of that.
I do.
So.
I do. It's. What can I say? It's very flattering. Thank you very much.
And by the way, I have to say, I love the hair. You just
Thank
had a
you.
little hair doing done.
Just a little trim here and
Just
there.
a little trim.
Yeah.
And so it's good to see you. You look lovely as ever.
I'm going to have to use the glasses
Ravageable. I mean, ravishing.
No, I can see.
Oh, hello, librarian.
Woohoo!
Oh, there it is. Mm.
And meanwhile, while I'm on here, I'm still trying to get on with the other ones. So carry on.
That's right. So I am drinking afternoon coffee. That's the kind of day it's been. So, hey, everybody that's gathering over in the chat room. Anita Palmer, I see you, and Romeldian, and Michelle Canham Freedom from Canada, but now in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's is a small place, but there's a lot of people from here. So we've got Valerie is here. Good to see you, Valerie. Nice to have you in here today. Roy Palvido, good friend of mine. And Barbie D is here, and others have gathered. If I missed you, it's not because, Viking Off-Roading is here. Good to see you. And it's not because Carlene is here, too. It's not because I skipped you. It's because it's not an active omission. I just didn't see you yet. And so while we've got the few of you hanging out in the chat room, there are a lot more listening. So we appreciate everybody's presence. If you want to come and join the chat room, you are welcome to. You can meet the Robertson chat family, and you can become part of it, and you can add to the conversation. I'm just talking because I know what it feels like. I know what Wendy's going through right now. Just things not working, and she's trying to get them working right. And
she is.
all you can say, you got to sit back and say, bugger.
Bugger.
So we're good, says Carlene. That's good. I'm glad to see you here. So let me take a sip of my coffee because I'm still suffering from this up and down chest cold. So if I cough during the show, it's just because I can't control it. Is it working?
I'm gonna come out of this one, and I'm gonna come
and you're
back
gonna
in.
come back. I'll be here. All right, folks. So how's your day going? Oh, there she is. Let's get her in here. Boom. Yay.
I'm in.
Good to see you, darling.
Hello.
And Anita wants you to know she loves the glasses. So
there you go.
Here. We can be twins. There we go. There, now I've got mine on. So I don't like these because they reflect my screen.
You look fabulous.
So I always get the non-glare, and I didn't get non-glare on these because these are really my work glasses. It's just so I can see the computer up close. So, and I didn't put the non-glare on them because who's going to see them, right?
You look fab.
Well, look who's talking. So, Dark Huntress, you've got up there.
I'm afraid I'm the Dark Huntress today.
You are the Dark Huntress today.
So sorry.
And that, folks, if you don't know her car, Wendy has a 67 black Impala called the Dark Huntress. And so she's got to take me for a ride in that one of these days.
Absolutely.
And it is an awesome car. If you've ever seen the show Supernatural, it's the car that's in that. There's just a slight difference. Wendy has the 2-door. It's a 4-door in the car in the show. And she rents that out for various occasions, and she drives it around looking hot and dark huntressy. So.
Thank you, darling. I've actually got some really exciting news, but I can't say anything about it yet. But maybe next week I'll be able to tell you some exciting news.
Is it something you already told me about?
No.
Oh, so new news.
No.
All right. Hey, Paige Rockwell's soiree. Good to see you over there in the chat room. And let's not have any further delay on this. Wendy and I have been talking about this topic. It's one of those tougher topics. It's a harder topic. It's a darker topic, I think. Because we were talking about, should we do a show on Jack the Ripper? Should we do a show on some of the other historical topics we talked about? And we really decided on this. We settled on this after a lengthy conversation. And so the title might be a little bit of a hint as to what we're going to talk about today. And I called it Love and Abuse. And in the graphic, it says, I love you, I abuse you. And I pulled a picture of, remember the old American Gothic painting with the old couple with the pitchfork?
Yeah.
And gave her a black eye and him a scar on his forehead. It's just symbolic. It's symbolic of the things that go on inside relationships. And it's not just, doesn't just have to be married relationships that we're talking about here. It's any kind of relationship. It can be friendships. It can be a business relationship. There are all kinds of relationships. So Wendy, why don't you kind of take away what's on the top of your mind on this and why we're doing this and what it's all about?
Actually, it was someone contacted me and said, would we talk about this subject? And they were looking at it from all kinds of areas. So it wasn't just like relationship, and it was in school, it was at home, it was all kinds of it. And it was bullying, abuse, violence, manipulation, all kinds of stuff. And when you and I started talking about it this afternoon, we realized just how much of a huge subject it absolutely was.
It really is.
And it doesn't just cover like one topic, it covers a lot. And it actually brought up quite some raw emotions, like
it did.
Yeah, it did. So, I mean, the thing about love and I sound like a cynical old bean, but it's like love is not always the answer for everything sometimes, because when you are in an abusive situation and you say those immortal words, but I love them, it's not very healthy at all. Abuse comes in many forms: manipulation, gaslighting, bullying, violence, degrading, humiliation, cheating, all kinds of stuff. Abuse covers a huge area. And I think we've all had it in one sense of form in our lives, whether it be from our parents, from school, from friends, from our partners, from work, or it can be sexual abuse, it can be physical, mental, emotional, racial, religious. It covers so many areas that we thought that it was something we should look at, because we're not afraid to tackle these hard subjects.
We on a feed to tackle these subjects.
Yeah.
And let me just say greetings, brother Joe Andrassi from Pennsylvania. Known Joe for a long time, so welcome to the program. And it's this whole thing. I used to think the whole abuse thing was getting out of line, out of hand. I thought, everything's abuse. It's kind of like racism and talk of racism in the last several years. If everything is racist, then nothing is racist. And so I used to say the same of abuse. If everything is abuse, then nothing is abuse. But not everything is abuse. But abuse, I think, does cover a lot more areas than we used to think it did. Yeah. Because we thought of abuse. What's the first thing you thought of years ago when somebody would talk about it? This man's abusing his wife.
Yeah.
You think, oh, he's beating his wife. There's battering. There's physical abuse going on. Yet we came to learn that abuse can take, as you just said, many different forms.
Yes.
You can be abusive and never lay a hand on the other person.
Yep.
And you can be abusive with your words. You can be abusive by bullying. You can be abusive by gaslighting. All of these things are things that we have recognized for a long. Gaslighting, we've known what that is for a long time. In the 40s, Ingrid Bergman and can't think of the actor, not Frederick March, somebody like that, but didn't they make a movie called Gaslighting? He was trying to drive his wife crazy.
Yeah.
And that was 80 years ago. And so we've known about these forms of abuse for a long time. And so when Wendy and I got to talking about this in great depth, we started, as we were talking, we weren't going through a bullet-pointed list or thing. Yeah. All of a sudden we said, I said, there was this. And Wendy would say, oh, and then there's this. And I experienced that. And then we started thinking of people that we know, Rainey, my wife, other people we know, and the different points of things that are abuse in their pasts. Has everybody been abused? It seems like the numbers are so great, or is it just the people who talk about it that we know about? What do you think? Is this how widespread a problem is?
Well, it's the old thing, isn't it? It used to, what goes on indoors, stay indoors. How many relationships and scenarios in the 70s, let's use those for example, and backward, you didn't talk about it. You didn't mention it. It was one of those things. You saw someone with a bruise on or a mark or whatever, and it went. In some ways, it was accepted for years that men, using that scenario, men could beat their wives. In fact, they were encouraged to beat their wives, because it's like, don't let her talk back to you. Don't let her have a brain. You're the head of the family and all that lot. And and that's that went on for even hundreds and hundreds of years. And I guess it's very sad that went on. Very, very sad.
It is. It is.
Hello, my love.
Hey, we've got Valerie Resnick is joining us today.
And it's
hey, Val.
Hey, Val.
Hey.
It's lovely.
How are you all?
Not so bad. And now you are calling from, you're out there in Virginia, right?
I am. I'm down in the little peak part of Virginia.
the Little Peak part of Virginia. And
Yeah,
Wendy was telling me you might have some things you'd want to contribute today, and you've got that there are some great talking points here to be brought up. But
sure.
Why are we talking about abuse today, and why is it something that, when you start thinking about it, many of us here, not everybody has gone through this. Most people here probably wouldn't be the abuser, but most people here have probably seen it or experienced it in one form or another.
I think you don't even realize sometimes you're in an abusive situation, and I didn't. I mean, certainly the first time it happened to me, I knew I was, but the second time it happened to me, I did not. And it wasn't until a friend said to me the second time round, you're in an emotionally abusive relations. No, I'm not. That's just who they are. And they were like, no, Wendy, this is abuse.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, wow, I didn't expect that to be told. And sometimes I used to think I was going crazy, that it was me that was causing it, that I didn't do something right, or I didn't act right, or I said something the wrong way, or maybe it's because I didn't have enough money, or maybe it was, the dog, or maybe it was whatever reason. And it made me feel like crap. And you live for the times where things are really, really good, and you're on a high thinking this is wonderful, and you're on what's the word I want to use? A tippy toe that it's not going to go down the same road again. Whereas that was the second one, but the first one was a hell of a shock when it happened, like 9 months in, and you don't know people until you're well in. And I always say to everybody, do not commit that early into a situation, because you don't know that person until you spend time with them. Do you really know them? Because if you do, you're trapped. You can't get out that easily. I was involved by 9 months in. The first time they lost their temper, it was an absolute shock to me, because they just flew. And I was like, oh my God. And I was pinned against the wall, but, like with right up to my face. And I was kind of like, okay, calm down. And then they changed just like that. They were just back to normal. And I was like, I've imagined it. It's not really what's happened. And that was the first sign. And I put it down to bad mood. He's tired.
Mm-hmm. We make excuses.
Exactly. And then as time went on, humiliation, name calling, degrading, you name it. Like, my sanity, to the edge of my sanity and back, until I actually thought, why the hell would anyone want to be with me? And I was abused in front of people. I was abused in the home, in front of, not so much in front of my family, but there would be the odd comments. And my family would say to me, we're just waiting for the call, Wendy. We're just waiting for the call.
Wow.
But to tell us that something's happened to you. And at that time, I was thinking, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And then there were a couple of instances where you look back and it goes, it's not like slapping you around the face, because it doesn't always happen like that. They don't always slap you around the face. Hi, Ken.
Right. Hey, Kenny.
It doesn't always happen with that. It comes really casual. They start to play with your mind. And Val can probably pick up for me with some of these things here. She knows, using this as scenario to begin with, in a domestic one, it comes subtly, and you can be, and then they look at other women, and you're like, and they'll say something to you like, well, if you were like that, or maybe if you did this, or maybe do that, and you're like, oh my God, it is horrendous. I'm sure Val can cut in now.
It's almost, it reminds me of that saying, if you throw a frog in a hot pot, he'll jump out.
Right.
But if you slowly bring the heat up, he'll sit there and cook.
Yeah.
Your connection's
it's like
a little
a
choppy.
Play.
Yeah.
Your connection's just a little choppy, Valerie. Yeah, we can hear you.
It's coming and going. 1 minute you're perfect, the next minute you're gone.
That's my life. That is my whole life.
Yeah, choppy 1 minute and perfect the next.
Choppy 1 minute and perfect the next. But did you get the reference? The frog?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay. That's kind of the way it is. It starts off really gradual and then builds up. And it's almost like you've played it off so many times that you don't realize how much it's growing.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know.
And it
and
is.
then one day you snap and realize it.
Right. And there is a gradualism to
and
it.
wonder why you stayed so long.
Yeah.
Yes. And you wondered why you stayed so long.
And still stay with it, because there are some people today still in those kind of relationships and wanting to come out. I mean, using another example, I know people who have got abusive parents, and I particularly know a young lady who is just the most amazing lady, and her mother, will berate her and put her down and call her all kinds of names under the sun, and you need to leave and you need to get out. And she's constantly not knowing whether to stay, to go, and she's frightened to go home sometimes because she's on tenterhooks. And I think, it plays with your head. Abuse isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional. And it's a subject I'm incredibly strong about. And I've had, I'm a counselor, I've had therapy for it. I've counseled women who have been with gentlemen, that, if that's the right word to call them, because I actually think there's only
you're using it as a label, so don't worry about it. We get what you're saying.
I used to counsel for domestic violence situations with the women. My job was that I would have to find them a home, take them out of the scenario. And I remember I had one poor lady, she had a chunk bitten out of her leg, massive chunk, and he hit her, he'd gone for the dog, he'd smashed the place up, but she had that mental thing where it got to her mentally and she could not leave. And I got the dog sorted out, I got her a place, and the night before she was supposed to leave her home and go into the safe house, he rang her and she told him what was going on. He then left the country and went somewhere else. And she dropped all charges. And I said, next time he's going to come back and it's probably going to be even worse next time, because it's not a one-off. It's never a one-off. It's always like, maybe just for now, and you might get it for months. You might get safe. You might start feeling this is fine. It's going to be fine, but it's not. It comes back, and that's whether it's mental or sexual or physical. It's not a one-off, really.
Something you and I talked about earlier, Wendy, was how do people get into these cycles? And a lot of people who have been abused, you'll find that they'll stay in those cycles,
yes,
or they will get out. And some people are able to clear themselves of that and walk away and start new and be good. Other people's re-enter the cycle with someone else. And many times it's not just the abusive person who has a past that has brought them to the place where they do what they do. And perhaps you could say, I could look at an abuser and say, there is somebody who maybe is a piteous person. I could have pity on that person because whatever happened to them that led them to be that way. It's like we do the same thing with murderers or mass murderers. We look at them, we know how atrocious they are. And yet we'll go, what happened to that person early on in life that made them that way? Were they just a bad seed, or did something go wrong that twisted the way they think? And I bring that up because, and I talked to you about this a little bit today, but there are things in my own past, and I know, Wendy, just like there are things in your past, and I know that, and Valerie, I'm sure things in your past. There are things that lead us to be in the positions that we're in. Now, I don't believe I've ever been an abuser in any kind. And I only say it that way because somebody might look at me and say, well, you were once verbally or emotionally, but I don't think I'm any of those things. So, and I don't think I have the traits that for somebody who does. But I will say this: some of my listeners of my show already know this. I have an article that I wrote, and I put it up on my academia account several years ago. But some of the things I bring to the and I'm going to preface this by saying I don't have a problem talking about this stuff. It's always been memories. It's always been things I can talk about and deal with them on either an intellectual point of view, a psychological point of view. But as somebody told me that was giving me counsel 30 years ago, she said, okay, I got all your information. She says, now, what do you feel about that? And I couldn't connect with that. And she said, here's what you do, and here's why. Here's what I'm seeing. And that became kind of the core of what we did. But when I was a little kid, I'm talking a little kid, I was sexually abused when I was a little kid. Now, and it was repeated, and it's something that I never lost the memory. I was 5 years old, by the way, and it was male babysitter, all of that kind of stuff. You can use your imaginations. And I grew up with that, and he never got in trouble because he threatened us. If you tell your mom, then, there'll be trouble. And so we just shut our mouths. It was a 5-year-old kid. What do you do? And so that went on. And when that ended, I never lost the memory of it, but it faded. It wasn't like oh my God, I'm thinking of this and it makes me go into some kind of a mental lapse of some kind. Never did that. It was always a memory, always something that I knew happened. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, and when I was doing this counseling way back then, that I realized this was something that affected me on a much deeper level than I thought. And something that this counselor said to me, and I was only seeing the counselor. Well, number one, my wife and I at the time, we were not doing well. There was abuse in the relationship. There was all kinds of stuff. And I went and I talked to her. I said, what is wrong with me? What am I bringing to the table that's wrong? And she made this statement, and this isn't to aggrandize my own situation. It's to be able to talk about it. She said, you are a classic textbook case of someone who's been sexually abused when they were a kid. And I said, well, how so? Because I'm a tough guy. I'm a guy. That stuff that we blow that off. And she said, people who are abused in this way generally will grow up and they will find that they've gotten into relationship after relationship after relationship, romance after romance, business settings after business settings, friendships after friendships. And the common core thread running through a lot of these is that all of those relationships are somebody that you view deep down in your subconscious. There's an abuse there. There's an abusive string there. And you get yourself involved because subconsciously, for as good or ill as this sounds, you get yourself involved in the bad situation so you can work through whatever the problem is and eradicate it. And she said, the person you're with now is doing that. And this is 30 years ago. And these other people you've been involved with on a business level, this person's doing this. If you don't see that. And these were things that I learned at that time. And something I also said to Wendy, and I'll monopolize the time because I could talk about this for 4 hours. So stop me and let me say this. I think anybody who's dealt with this stuff, you don't live back there. You live here, but that back there is something I either camp there and I do live there, or I leave it back there. Never going to forget it. I'll never forget what it's done to me, but it's something that these things will always be with us, and you can either leave it behind and move forward, or you can. I've got a couple of Star Trek references. Captain Kirk once said in one of the movies, somebody's trying to take away his pain magically. And what did he say? He said, it made an impact on me because I thought about this stuff. so much. So a pop cultural reference. He said, I don't want my pain taken away. He said, I need my pain. My pain has made me who I am. What do I need to do? If I had turned left every time I should have turned right, he says, I don't need that undone, because those are the things that have built me into who I am. And so while there's many of us that have experienced abuse,
yes,
there's many of us that said, I leave that back there. I don't I don't exist there anymore.
How about you, Val? Like, what do you do with yours? How do you deal with that?
Well, I'm finally at a place now where I'm out of that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It took me many, many years to stop going from one, my first husband to my second husband, then another relationship, and they're all, the same. Some a little different, but pretty much the same. It took me many years to make myself stop that cycle. And once I did, I was able to find myself again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it took a long time.
How did you stop yourself from the cycle? How did you stop yourself?
Uh-oh.
Technical differences.
Technical difficulties.
How did you stop
she's moving.
Val? How did you get out of the cycle?
We might have lost you a little bit there, or you're not hearing us. It's speaking of cycling, it's cycling over there.
I know what you mean, though, but
Val, I'm going to take you off of the broadcast, and if that you can get that remedied, come on back in, and I'll add you back in.
I think the cycle is like once the thing is about abuse is that you can't always see it. It doesn't always have to be physical. It's mental, and it stays with you for years. You have little demons or big demons in your head going, but remember this. And I'd like a comment very much down here that Philip actually wrote. He says, I've never been in a serious romantic relationship because I've never been able to trust. And I can tell you, Philip, after being in 2 serious romantic relationships with men that both were abusive and very similar, actually, I still don't trust, and I never probably will ever again. I don't think I will ever trust. If I do give my trust, there's always that part of me that's like, whoa, because you've been damaged. And it's like, you come from, I think also people get used to abuse as well. If they've grown up with it, they might not have liked it, but it was some of the norm, dad beat mum or mum beat the kids, or, it can be a cycle. And then, I remember at home, my brother and dad always fought. My sister and brother always fought, and there was violence. They would beat the crap out of each other, and I would be standing there screaming with my hands over my ears, going, "No, no, 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 no! Stop, stop, stop!" I grew up in a family, even though my mum was fantastic and kept me very, very safe and grounded. I saw things that, like a lot of children did, they should never have seen in the family home. Mum and dad going for it, dad going for the children, younger children seeing it. And what happens is you grow up with that and you think to yourself, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to happen. That's never going to happen to me.
I will never be like that, you say.
It does happen. Sometimes they become the abuser, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a familiar pattern. And it's how they responded, or they become the other way. They go into abusive relationships because it's familiar. It's a familiar pattern. And so it's like, why do they end up with one toxic relationship after? Well, why did this one fail? Well, why did that one fail? In the end, you are the common denominator, and you have to look at that and go, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? What am I picking up? I think sometimes we meet people, they're narcissists. They pretend to be, like, as you know, very into us, very much take us in, make us feel safe. They mirror us in a lot of ways. And then once they've got us in a very safe, secure place, they will turn that corner, and then comes the name calling, or the, why are you doing this? Or you're just, you've been there, Scotty, what
Yes.
it's like, what I'm saying. And it doesn't matter what age group you come under. I was bullied at school. I had to leave my school due to bullying. I had to give up my school at 13 and leave, and I never got the education that I should have had due to bullying.
Right.
And that's something for the rest of my life I've had to live with. And then I got into an abusive. It's like, I don't know whether we sensitive people, because Val and I touched this on Saturday night, sensitive people, psychic people, yes, it is a Buddha. Literally, we tend to draw them in. Do you not find that, Val? We tend to draw them in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It takes so much more to get yourself back after years of, the manipulation and the emotional, mental, all of it, abuse. It takes so much more to get yourself back, because you've almost forgotten, what you were really like.
Yeah.
So even once I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Then I started working on trying to get myself back. And it took a long time.
I said a few minutes ago that I had a couple of Star Trek references. And this is one, Wendy and I talked about this too today, in speaking about trying to get it back, trying to overcome it. We often don't realize what has happened and that we need to overcome something. That's like I say, I was in my 30s before I realized that there was something going on that I didn't understand, that had its roots back there. But like I said, I say, you don't live back there, but it's still there. It's still back in your memory. The example was, it's another Star Trek reference. There was, if any of you are Star Trek fans and you used to watch Deep Space Nine with Brooks Avery playing the captain, and in the very first episode, you're introducing all the characters, and without getting into a big detailed discussion of the plot lines and the writers, there was a mystical presence that he had to, there was the religion of the people that he was dealing with, and it would speak to him like in a vision. And there he was, standing alone in the command central, it wasn't a bridge, but the command center of his space station. And this voice is saying to him in a conversation that was, you can only think of it in the way that you imagine a God speaking to a person. And this mystical voice said, where do you exist? And he stands there and he looks around and he says, here, this is where I exist. In his command center there. And then the scene switches to a few years earlier. His wife, who was a captain of a ship, had been killed in a battle. And he's on her bridge and it's burning and smoking, and she's lying dead on the floor. And because he was standing there and he said, this is where I exist. And then it switches to that scene and the voice says, then why do you exist here? And it was asking that question. If you exist in the here and now, and I would ask you, Wendy, and you, Valerie, and me, and friends that are listening, if we exist here, then why are we existing back there? If we stay living back there, then we are constantly a victim of our own memories, the things that were done to us. Because I can tell you what, somebody can cut off my finger, and I may always miss that finger. All right? And I'll always remember somebody cutting off my finger. But I can live in that and grieve about my missing finger, or I can find out ways to operate without having that finger. I can become a shop teacher. So all these things happen to us, and we either learn from them and grow from them, or and I'm sure you both have known people, many of our listeners have known people that you can tell are trapped in that cycle. They can't escape from it, and they keep getting themselves into it. And like I started to say before, and let me turn it over to you. The counselor I was seeing, when she said you're a textbook case because you get yourself constantly into repeating bad relationships and situations. And she said, I said, why would I do that? And she said, because you're trying to cure it. You're trying to heal it. That's the subconscious part, because you don't know you're doing it. She says, you get into it so you can hopefully find out what went wrong and fix it. And so you guys.
I mean, Ken's quite right. Women are just as abusive as men, right? I know many women that are just as abusive, and they've beaten their men and hit their men and all kinds of, and women are abusive to their children as well. You know, it's not, and animals and all kinds of things. It just goes on. I don't live in the past. I have moved on. But I think what happens is there's this button in my brain. And if you hear something, if you sense something or see something, you're back there in an instant. And what happens is they tend to knock, and I think Val would agree, they tend to knock one devil out and two devil in. So you become a completely different person. And I don't believe those words. When someone says to me, don't worry, I'll never hurt you, those do not mean anything to me, because it's just words. And I will never feel 100% safe with anyone ever again, because, and it's a shame, because there are good people out there and there are good women and good men, but there are the bad ones damage us for the good ones. And by the time the good ones do come in our life, we're all screwy, and we're kind of looking at them going, yeah, but, and then you just have to have one word, one sentence, which I'm sure Val can pick up on me now, literally, and you're back there.
Yes.
It's almost like, like we were talking Friday night, you can be around someone, you can really like them, they can be really nice. And for myself, they could raise their arm to scratch their head, and I would, flinch. And that went on for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think you lose yourself, and you don't really realize it, because it happens over a long period of time, and it's so slow. They go chipping away at you, at who you are, until they make you who they want you to be.
Right.
Instead of who you really are.
And those powerful three words, I love them, or I love you, or it's a subject that I'm very emotive about. A, because I've counseled people. B, because I've been in it. And C, I've seen the damage done to other people. And it can be, I know men that have been beaten by women, and I've seen it, and they're like, no one believes me. No one believes me that she's like this, and I'm a big guy, and why can't I take care of myself, and why is this happening? And they berate them. I've seen them in the shopping centres and all that lot, and they talk to their men like a piece of dirt, and you're like, good men, and there's always that saying, why is it good people end up with bad partners? And I also think as well, sexual abuse is something
that can take on a different view than,
absolutely,
if that's where you're heading. It's not always somebody did something to you. It could be somebody's not doing something to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but have you not been in relationships where they go something like, well, if you're not going to give it to me, I'm going to go and get it somewhere else, or if you don't do this, I'm going to get it somewhere else. It's this whole blackmail, manipulation, and it's like, and then you'll meet someone else and they could just joke it to you, and you're like, excuse me.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that they've taken you back there. But I think when you get involved with someone who's been in a toxic situation or a violent situation or abusive, it's not straightforward. I mean, that, Scotty, like, you've had to you.
Sure.
Val's had it happen to her. It's always there. And you could end up with Forrest Gump as a partner.
Yeah.
And still be waiting for him to just,
when
you're
I
constantly waiting for the other shoe to fall.
Yes.
Yeah. When I first met
Always.
Rainey, 18 years ago now, just about. And when I first met her and we started to hang out, as adults hang out, friends, doing stuff together, and it started to get a little serious. And I just said, look, I'm not doing that ever again. That was what these things had done to me. I had been married twice before. The second marriage was the worst. I had my first 3 kids from that marriage, but that was bad. That was very abusive. And I just said, look, we can hang out, we can do stuff, but I will never give myself to a relationship again. That was the position I was in. I just said, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
To guys,
I've been in that position myself.
Why don't you take her out? I don't want to. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
And, but obviously my mind got changed. But
do you find like you're always looking for ways out as well, Val and Scotty? Do you find that once you came out of that situation, you always had to find a way out, a secure way out? You've always had to. I remember like when I was in the first one, the door was there. The door was there. Where was my phone? Where was my keys? Where was my purse? Oh my God. I was terrified to even leave the cats at home at one point. I was like, and now I still do that. I'm in that situation where I'll be like, where's the door?
Mm-hmm.
I need to have my freedom.
And
I breathe.
I would never let them come and pick me up. I always either met them somewhere or I would go to their house.
Yeah.
Because I had to have the security of my vehicle.
Yeah.
And
I didn't want to be under, any. I didn't want to be there if I didn't have a way home.
We got just a slight glitch in timing on here. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
People can find it quite offensive when you go, well, I'm not your ex. I'm not abusive.
Yeah.
Why should I have to put up with with how you were treated? Why should I have to walk on eggshells? And it's like, that's absolutely that's true. It is unfair. Mm-hmm. It is unfair for a lot of people. But unfortunately, if you come out of that situation, if your parents beat on you when you were young and you get older, there's always that side to you. That's part of who you are. And mm-hmm. They either have to accept that and take that on, or they don't. And they should understand why you need to have the door here, why you need to be positioned there, why I remember when I got married the second time, that was fine. But that happened. I got married after the abusive relationship. The first time I was married, I'd never had any abuse. I'd never had anything happen to me. My first husband was a complete gentleman, and I never knew what it was. I'd seen other people happen it, not to me. Then I had the abusive one, and it was like, I deserve this. I've left a really good marriage. I deserve everything I'm getting, because that's how bad it had affected me. And then when I came out and I met my second husband, he was like, you need to go to counseling for this one, because I wanted to kill him. And there's still a part of me that still wants to kill him, because I hate him for what he did to me, for how he's changed me forever. And also for what I gave 4.5 of my best years. And I remember there was one thing he said to me, because I was trying, I couldn't get pregnant. I was, there was lots of fertility issues. And he said, well, obviously God doesn't want you to have a baby. That's why he's made you barren as a desert.
Nice.
And I just sat there thinking, what's wrong with you, Wendy? Leave, just go. And I didn't. And it's like, I just kept taking it and kept taking it and kept taking it. And I, to this day, Scotty and Val, I don't know, and Val probably will know why I took it. Because everyone said to me, we don't even want to invite you around anymore, because it's so bad how he berates you in front. And it's hard for me at 53 to sit here. There's a woman I am today who's very in your face and very sort of, come on then, very different to, I look back to who I was and go, oh my God, like, you know, I was constantly, you know, do I look good enough? Am I going to be good enough for him? It's so awful. And I'm sure, Val, you were in the same boat.
Of course. And it's constant making excuses for him. Well, he doesn't feel good today. He's probably tired.
Yeah.
You know, it's constant. You know, they do to you, and then you make excuses for it.
Yeah.
And all the while, it's just chipping away at who you are.
Yeah.
You know, it's turning you into someone who accepts it.
Yeah.
For guys, there's almost the opposite effect of that, because we aren't supposed to be abused.
Yeah.
I mean, this society that we're in, especially in the West, we're the big tough ones. I was always taller and bigger than any of my wives, and my 2 wives before Rennie. And my first wife, she was a sweetheart. She had her own issues. Still a friend of mine today. We had our issues, but I didn't see her for 19 years. She called me out of the blue to do a 12-step and make amends to me for what she did to our marriage. She never abused me or hurt me. She did things and she just needed to get out. I don't ever want to badmouth her. She's a good person. But my second wife, I had my 3 kids with, there was a lot of stuff. And a lot of things where Ken might know what this is like. I'm sure he would have the domestic calls. And many times now, my ex-wife, she would hit me, slap me. I can take that. She kicked me in the nuts once. She hit me stereotypically, and how cliche, with a frying pan once. Hit me with a stack of books. She hit me in front of people. And that was just the physical stuff. And there was all that other stuff. And I know you all have, but for a guy to admit that he had a wife that abused him, and it's not that I was like, oh, don't hit me. It wasn't like I was a wallflower. It was that I knew as a man, I didn't have a right to raise my hand to her. And so that abuse that she did many times would end up with me blocking things. Or at one time, you know why the police came? Because she called them, and I was taken out of the house because I grabbed her wrists to stop her from beating me with a pan in her hand. And things like that. And you come out of that, and I only bring that up to say, I'm sure you two have your stories like this as well. But the things I grew up with, and I said to Wendy earlier today, I said, there is a thing, and only people who know me really well have caught on to this. So maybe it's not really revealing a secret. It's just talking about what this stuff does to people. Is that I was talking to Wendy today, and by the end of that conversation, she said, are you going to be able to do this today? I said, yeah, I can. I said, I'm fine. And she laughed. She goes, there it is. You're fine. Yeah. And because this is what many of us do. We say, we move on from that stuff. And for me personally, I have a whole heap and helping of bravado that I put out there in the front of me. Mm-hmm. And I have expectations of what my relationship would be, my family should be, my friends should be. And I try to nurture those expectations, not say, oh, you didn't match my expectations, so I got a problem with you. Instead, I try to nurture those things. But the exterior that I put out is not always the interior that is like, I don't know, it's like watching paint dry. You know, you can touch the surface of the paint and it feels dry. You push on it and all of a sudden, whoosh, it all oozes out. And so I have this bravado I've developed over my lifetime that is gregarious or cheerful or happy or positive or whatever it might be on the outside, while all it takes is that little fingernail scratch, as I said to Wendy today, to open it up. Because it's stored right beneath the surface. And many times you don't even know it's there anymore. Sometimes you forget it's there because you operate out of the things you did to cope with the abuse, the things you did to cope with the feelings that could tear you to pieces. Those are the things that you now have covered up for so long. I said to Wendy today, and let me ask you two this. I said, I sometimes wonder, it wasn't really a question as more of a statement. I said, I sometimes wonder, what kind of person would I have been like if I didn't go through the abuses I went through? Would I be a totally different person? Because it's those things that have formed who I am today. My personality today is what it is. Would I have been a crass asshole if I never had to cover things up? And you look at that stuff and you wonder, now, how about you guys? And I want to tie this in as being pertinent to this discussion for those who have gone through their own particular types of abuses. You too, Wendy, who I love dearly, and Valerie, who I'm getting to know better and better, and the people that we know have been through these things. You experience them, but then you have to put a shellac over it because it never really goes away. And I want to tie that into people who've been abused. And you two, take that away and tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I think it's like we're like tortoises. We carry it around with us, like you say. And we do move on because we move away from that situation. And so we move into more positive. We surround ourselves with positive people, positive situations. And if anything negative comes in our life, we tend to just go bye-bye. But I think for me, one thing that probably would have helped my growth and moving on was that if he had taken responsibility for what he did, and for years later for him to turn around and say to me, yeah, but you deserved it, and you would deliberately do this to me, and that I was like, what? And it inflamed the demon that had been sitting there quiet for so many years. So I don't think we're ever the same people. And although we move on and we become calmer and we stay away from negative and toxic situations, if I was in a relationship today with someone and they raised their voice and they lost their temper in a certain way, I'd be looking for the door.
Yeah.
They'd be looking for the door. And this has caused issues in my relationships because I'm scared. I am terrified. And even though I've had counseling and I've done everything, it's still there that I couldn't get out. I have to get out. And I think if someone really loves you and they come into your life, they will allow you the freedom to be yourself, to understand that you've had this happen to you, and they will know when they know when they see the signs. And it's like, I'm not a woman to piss around with now. I am not a woman.
Ain't that the truth?
Right? Because you will lose me just like that.
Yep.
And I will cut you off.
On that point, we've got to say goodbye to the radio audience. It's timing, folks. So we're going to go out for just a quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back here in a minute on the YouTube channel. So radio audience, you know what? Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time. All right, we're back without being on the radio now. We are just in the chat room in the YouTube group, and we're opening this up.
See the chats. So.
Oh, you can't see the chat? Oh, on your phone, it's really hard sometimes to see it, especially from the YouTube. So, folks, if you want to...
We were just asking, Val, like, obviously, how did you move on from it? I mean, what's your trigger now? Like...
I was sitting here thinking about that. Like I said, it took me years. I'm at a point right now. I don't really get triggered.
That's great.
That's good.
I mean, I don't get triggered. I do speak up more. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah.
Even my ex-husband, we had to go to court for something not long ago. We sat there and I talked to him, and I didn't feel the same way that I used to feel.
Yep.
I think he was kind of inverted.
Yes.
Because I was up and outspoken, and I didn't allow him to see he had any power.
Right.
And he kind of done the turtle thing.
Yeah. Well, it's a truism that the person who shows that they really care less in a relationship or out of it, in your case, is really the one that's got the power.
Yes.
It's a part of taking your own power in things. And I hate that phrase only because it gets overused. I have taken my power back. And it's like, oh, whatever. Okay.
Well, I think the biggest revenge is to be happy and to have a really productive, positive life, and to surround yourself with really good people and people that have got your back. And that takes time, and it's not just intimate relationships, it's relationships, friendships, and everything, right? Because you have to get your self-esteem back, you have to get your confidence back. And Scotty, like, you're in a marriage, and it's like, if you have a situation in your marriage where it brings back something or a situation, how do you deal with that?
I work very hard at not trying to let my past be linked by anything that happens in the present, because Rainey is not my past. She is not that person or those people. Sometimes she will do or say things that I get that in the back of my head that just goes, fuck. That's exactly what I experienced. But to say that is to then drag her into, here, let me stuff you into my baggage. And I'm not going to do that. I refuse to do that. There's been very few times I think I've ever done that. Now, there are times where, I've said things like, hey, you know what? And I don't pull this card out very often, but I'm 20 years older than my wife. Early on in our relationship, there were times I'm like, hey, you know what? I've been around the block. I'm not a kid. So don't talk to me like I'm a kid. And I've never been, I'm older and you're immature. I've been, I've matured. I'm a little older than you, but it's not that I haven't experienced these things. That's how that stuff has come out in the past, and abandoned that a long time ago. But how do I deal with it? I try not to let it ever happen. Then again, there is that thing that is where you are hooked into old modes of you exist here. Well, then why do you exist back there? There are those things that we have that drag us back in subconsciously, and we don't realize it. So
the way
Remeldian been sitting here in the wings.
The way I see myself.
Yes.
The way I see myself, I see who I used to be, what all happened to me, and put them together, and it makes me who I am now.
Yes.
It's kind of like I didn't leave it in the past. It's not stuck back there. I pulled it to the forefront and dealt with it, and it just became a part of who I am.
Yes.
And
I understand that.
And I can't say I wish none of it happened, because if none of it happened, who would I be right now?
Yes, I agree with that. Michelle Cannon-Free just said, when you get to a place where other people's behaviors and words have no effect on you, you're free.
There you go.
There's this song, and I'm always reminded of pop cultural things, of music. A song, it's a Christian song written by a Christian songwriter, but it's edgy, and he's an edgier, songwriter and so on in the pop cultural world. But that song that says, I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God, he says. It's a moving song. And you can plug God into that, your gods, your spirituality, whatever it might be. But Wendy and I, we started talking today about the topic of fear. We were thinking about that as a topic. And it all evolved into this. Because we're all driven by our fears. We're driven by the things. I don't even know how to word that. So you get it. But when I say I'm no longer a slave to fear, that's the truth. I had somebody challenge me once, said, yeah, you are. I said, no, I'm not. I'm not a slave to it anymore. Do I have fears? Yeah. Do I let them govern my actions? No. Other things govern my actions. How about you, Wendy?
I'm with Anita. Anita just put up a very good quote. And I was like, yeah, I was exactly the same. I've never had the apology. I've never, for me, I think, I went into counseling. I've had therapy. I've done so many things, in my spiritual work, fear, false evidence appearing real. So literally, our fears can get the better of us. Of course they can. And sometimes it is our fears responding. I think I've gone out of my way not to go with people that remind me of anything of them, that don't look like them. They don't have anything that reminds me of them. But if I do meet someone that does remind me, then that shield comes up straight away.
Yes.
And I think for me, it was like getting my self-esteem back and confidence in myself as a person, as a woman, as no one is ever going to talk to me like that again. And it's like, it took me years to get here.
Yeah.
It's taken me years to get to this person. And like, my mom always says, they really knocked out one devil and two in. And it's true.
Yeah.
Do. And so even though I've moved on from that, and I'm normally a very easygoing person, this subject is emotive because it brings back memories, as you know, this afternoon, Scotty, when we were talking about it. And what about if your parents abuse you? What if you come from an abusive parent background? How do you have a relationship with as you get older? Or do you not have a relationship? Because at the end of the day, this is the people that you're supposed to trust to bring you up safe.
Right.
And what if you can't because they've abused you either verbally or physically or mentally or even sexually? But how do you get over that? But the people that are supposed to keep you safe don't.
Right.
And I would imagine that kind of screws you up in a lot of ways because children are born innocent. They are born innocent and they're like sponges. And as they get older, they absorb things. And, the father, Freud always says the first woman that a man ever loves is his mother. And the first man for a daughter is the father. Given those relationships, if we're not shown proper role models when we're younger, we grow up with a warped sense and into our own relationships. So I think that sometimes, when you hear about child abuse and abusive in young relationships, in going into families, that's not even talked about even in today's society. But back when I was growing up, you were hit by your parents. Your parents did hit you. You would slipper, ruler, backhand on the back of
the belt.
I actually know someone who used to
The switch.
They
Go
used
cut
to.
a switch from the tree.
This story haunted me. His mother would say, "You're going to stay there in a line till your father comes home," and they would have to wait. All of them standing, and when he would come home, he would get his belt off and he would walk up and down like a sergeant major, and he would say to them, "So who's going to admit to it and who's with this?" And they were all like terrified. And in the end, he would belt them all, right? Belt them all. And it was like, I can't imagine. I was lucky that I never had that, but what a terrible thing. So I think that it depends on our backgrounds. It depends. And I'm sure, like, Chief can come in here as well, bless him. But, it depends on what we went through. Each one of us is going to come out differently.
Yes. Romeldi, and you've been sitting there very patiently for a long time. We actually had Ken Ballos popped in too, and I haven't been able to bring him in. He popped back out. Ken, you can try again. We've got Uncle Dave sitting in the wings too. So,
Yeah,
Romeldi, what's on your mind, brother?
There is one thing I do regret in not asking how the whole government contract that I signed with my mother back in my senior year, because I thought that contract was supposed to be temporary, because I just turned 18 right before my senior year. And that gave my mother permission to be my guardian over my financial purposes, because I was still in high school. 10 years later, I meet Mother Rella through Scotty Roberts.
Yeah.
And I was studying, spirit guides and stuff. And one of my spirit guides came to me and said to go to Scotty Roberts' channel because this is something that you are interested in. And that's how I found Rocky Stoogie, and Rocky Stoogie was doing his show with Mother Rella on Friday nights. Mm-hmm. And so I did my first reading with Mother Rella, and I asked her about like my past and purpose and stuff like that. And one reading, I asked her about how hard is it for me to tell my mother that I want to move. And she told me it's going to be extremely difficult for you because she had this hidden narcissist energy that is not aware of. So I started testing the waters about moving. And it wasn't until after I quit my job because of COVID, that's when I really started to see the narcissist energy. So I asked her to go to court for Christmas so she can end that contract because it's been 10 years since my senior year in high school. And I lost the court battle. My mom did all the speaking in court. I got maybe a minute to speak up, and that was, are you able to handle your own money? I'm like, yes, I can handle my own money and my own health the way I see fit. Because I don't trust the modern health system, which is why I don't go to those places anymore. And now I haven't been able to move to my place of peace where I can write. And they just extended the guardianship another year. I'm like, and what my current guardian put in what they told to the court was a lie.
Wow.
And I haven't been to family Christmas in the last 3 years because of that.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Sorry to hear that, brother. These are things that I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just stating the obvious. There's things you got to do and find ways to get this wrangled for your own life. Then you already know that.
Take the banner down so we can see him better.
Oh, yes. Hey, tip your camera up a little bit too, or down, so we can see you. There you go.
Yeah, we can see you now.
Yeah, I've got the banner
the
up here.
The first time I didn't go to the family Christmas because everybody wanted me to be vaxxed. I'm like, no, I am not doing that. I know. I did my homework. I know what it does. I try explaining to them, and nobody would listen. And the first sign of danger, they took it. I'm like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, you guys don't even want me to be free of the contract, so nobody's listening to me. It's like, by the second year, I just stopped bothering with them. It's like, one of those, hey, I'm giving you a warning. Don't you want to listen to the warning? No.
Well, I will say this, and as we all know, abuse comes in many forms, many shapes. There's always a couple of sides to things. We get that. And all I can say is, Romeldi, and I wish you the best. You're always welcome here. Keep us updated, brother.
Please do.
I understand. All right. So, yeah, we've all got stuff.
I think one kind of abuse that people don't realize is abuse is that manipulation and control. You know, when you're trying to control every aspect of someone else's life, and you tell them, and they make them believe they're incapable of it. So they need to handle it.
Yes.
And it's that manipulation. And I think a lot of people don't believe or don't think about that as being abuse, but it really is. It's kind of mental abuse.
I mean, it was very difficult in my mum's time because my mum actually had to get a doctor's letter to leave home, because when she was younger, you had to be 21. And my nan, God bless her soul, she was a tough cookie, but she was quite abusive to my mum. And, you know, if my mum didn't play the piano right, she would get a hard brush and she would beat her hands until she got it right. And my mum had a really tough, abusive childhood, and which was very hard because I loved my nan, but it was very hard to see what she went through. My mum was berated and abused in lots of ways, and even though nothing she ever did was good enough for my nan, and she had to go, and she was, you know, working long hours. She tried very hard, and she had to go to see her doctor, and she had to say, this is what, you know, I have to get out. And to actually rent somewhere else back then, you had to have written permission from a doctor or whatever to say. And she went to my grandfather to say, I've got to leave. I'm sorry, Dad. I've got to go. I can't live any longer under the roof with this situation. And he knew exactly. My nan was a very difficult lady. She would rip the newspaper out from my grandfather if he was not talking to her and throw it in the fire. She would throw knives and forks at him. If, you know, and my mom. So my mom would be like trying to like hide away from it. And so my mom had to get like written permission. And eventually she did. And I think my grandfather knew that if he dared put the signature down on it, he would have had hell. So she had to go to the doctor. And my mom said, can you imagine leaving home back then, and you've had to ask for the doctor's help to leave to get a place to rent, and you get one tiny room. Your mother doesn't want to talk to you because she thinks you're the dregs for leaving home. You can't talk to your father easily because he's going to get it. So all in all, it was very difficult, very different. Hello, my love.
There we got Kenny back. We still have Uncle Dave waiting in the wings too. So Kenny, how you doing?
Great. I want to put a second. Anybody, male, female, anybody that raised a hand to you, get the hell out.
That's right.
I'm sorry. I love you. I'll never do it again. That second beating is going to get worse.
Yeah.
That third beating you get might be the one that kills you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't give a shit. I love you with all my heart. Bullshit. Get the hell out. He raises force to you in a manner where it's threatening. Get the hell out. Don't go along with that little sheep, high-minded wolf. Look, be smart.
And you must have seen that many times in cases that you went to, Ken.
I've seen it a lot of times. Too many times to count. Too many times. And, you know, you get the impression, male or female, oh, I'm a good person. You're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I can read you. I can look at you. Just give me a couple minutes to talk to you. I'll tell you all about yourself. If I was being honest with you, you might not like it. That comes with years of experience. I ain't got to say much. I just got to listen and look at you.
There was Rainey and I were watching not long ago a real crime type of show where a news person was interviewing cops and detectives and things that had gone through these cases, and they showed actual footage and things. They were discussing several different cases, and there was somebody who had committed a murder, and good-looking young man, not somebody you would think of, collegiate-looking guy, and he said they find out, by the way, that he had committed at least 3 or 4 other ones that they knew of, and he made the statement saying, and I'm tying this into something you just said, Ken. He said, well, I'm a good person, but I have done some bad things.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the way he viewed himself. I'm a good person. I've done a few bad things, but I'm a good person.
Yeah. Great.
And it's like, no, you're a piece of shit.
Shit.
And, my instant response, I saw that and I looked at the TV and I said, fuck you. You are a piece of shit. And he was executed eventually for what he did. Which he deserved to be. I think. Good people who have slip-ups is one thing. Good people who hurt other people and keep doing it, that's not just a good person.
And also when they turn the you made me do it. You deserve.
Yep, you made me do this.
Yeah, look what you've done now. Look what you've done. You've brought this out of me.
I'm a nice guy, but I got this monster inside of me that can come out at any time.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? Use your brain. I'm a nice guy, but I have this other side. It can come on.
Well, it's like, as long as you do what I tell you to do and everything goes my way, I'm super.
Yeah.
If something happens to get a kink in it, I'm not super anymore.
My own kids will use the excuse.
So he can bring other people on. I don't want to tie up. Great show, entertaining. People need to hear this. They really do.
Good to see you, brother. All right, see you, Kenny.
I do have to say, all the years that it took me to find myself again, I was just at the beginning of it when I did find somebody that let me be who I really am. And that's that allowed me to heal, but have support as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No judgment, nothing, only be who you are.
Yes.
I think Ken's words were very, very strong and very
poignant.
Because of the job that he did as well, right?
My own kids, he prompted me to think of that. My own kids will sometimes go, I'm like, dude, why did you hit your sister? Well, she made me do it. I said, no. Nobody makes you act that way. I said, you have to choose your action. You have the ability to choose what you do.
Exactly.
And same with it goes for abusers and all of that. Let's bring Uncle Dave in. He's been patient and waiting there too. How you doing, Uncle Dave?
I've been patiently waiting.
You're so patient, Uncle Dave.
Boy, I have several things here on my head now. This reminds me of a situation. I was down in Texas at a Texas Renaissance Festival, and the ex-wife of one of my friends came up. She made a beeline for me. She walked up and just gave me a left hook like nobody's business. And the guy was standing with said, "What the?" And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I am so mad at Eric. I needed to punch some man, and I knew you wouldn't hit back."
I don't know if I'd buy that, to be honest.
I do.
Hey, you can talk to me. You don't have to punch me in the face.
That was one of Amy's things. She would haul off and deck me all the time. And in fact, when that came up in court, the judge said, do you hit Mr. Potter? And she got really sheepish. And she's like, well, yeah, sometimes. Has he ever struck you? No. Has he ever slapped you? No. Has he ever grabbed you violently? No.
Not that I can remember is usually what you
And she was trying to build a picture because I do stage combat. and fought for a living and did all that stuff, that I was a violent person. And yet
right.
I am exactly the opposite of that in real life. And when the judge said, "You're under oath, you have to speak honestly here," and she's like, "No, he's never lifted a hand to me." "But you've punched him more than once?" She like nods quietly, and he says, "More than 10 times?" She nods again. "More than 10 times you've punched him?" "Well, we've been together a long time," she said.
Nice. Well, we've been together for a while.
That covers the whole thing.
Going back to the conversation earlier when we were talking about bringing stuff from relationships, one of the things I wrote in my book after the divorce was you have to make a list of and be honest with both yourself and your partner and say, okay, here are all the things, the transgressions I did that I shouldn't have done, whatever those are, whether that's spending money that you shouldn't have spent or not treating her properly or whatever it is. Be honest with yourself and lay all those things out and lay all those their faults out that led to the delusionment of this dissolving of this relationship. And you have to be able to forgive yourself and forgive your partner.
Yeah.
In the end, all is said and done, we're exes now. I'm not going to carry this baggage with me for the rest of my life. Here are the things I did wrong. I will work on myself so I don't repeat that in my next relationship. And here are all the things that she did wrong, and I'm going to forgive her for those things, but I will be mindful of those things going into a new relationship so I don't repeat that pattern.
I will just say, Field Guy is still looking for a relationship. So, sorry, Field Guy.
Call me, Field Guy. Call me.
A little joke at your own expense. He's our 41-year-old virgin friend.
I cannot forgive, and nor will I ever forgive, because first of all, there's no remorse. Yes. They are still going out to this day, from what I've heard, causing abusive situations.
Yeah.
And recently in personal lives, and it's like I will never forgive. And in fact, I actually said the next time I see them will be when it's their funeral, and I will go to make sure they're actually gone, because
so you can dance a jig.
If you saw someone that actually took and said, look, I hold my hand up, I've done this, right? I know I have an issue, I have a problem, I need to deal with it, I'd have respect for that. I'd have a lot of respect for that. But I don't have respect for someone who dances around it or goes, no, but it wasn't like that, and then makes out that it was actually, but it was all good fun. It was all good banter. It was all part of the relationship. Really?
See, in my relationship, I took the blame for a lot. So Amy's first husband was a chef. I'm a chef. Amy's first husband worked out at the Renaissance Festival. I worked out at the Renaissance Festival. So anything I did that was like him, I was automatically guilty of everything he was guilty of.
Sure.
And so I had a lot of this stuff come back on me over and over and over again, even though I hadn't done these things, We had, Scotty and I have a couple that's a very good, that they're happily married. They have kids. They met at Scotch and Cookies. We both knew both of them long before they knew each other. She went through a string of relationships in the beginning of our Scotch and Cookies thing. I'm not going to say names because I don't.
I'm trying to think who you're talking about. That's all.
You were roommates with her for a while.
Oh, yes.
So string of relationships, and every time she would break up, she would jump right into another relationship, like within 24 hours, it seemed like.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, boom, I'm done with you. I'm starting with you. And she would just drag all this baggage with her. It was like, did you ever see the movie Mission, where the priest is the guy who was a slave trader, Robert De Niro's character, becomes a priest, and he's got this big, huge net with his armor and his swords and all this stuff, and he's dragging it through the jungle.
Very symbolic.
Very symbolic. And the young priest says to the older priest about him, why don't we cut that rope? He's slowing us down and this and that, and he's going to kill himself. And the older priest says when he is ready to let go of his old life, he will cut the rope.
Yep.
Okay. And so many of us drag this net behind us with all the baggage, all the bad things from our previous relationships, and we continue to drag it into our new relationships. And all that does is muck up your new relationship.
It does.
There comes a point where you have to cut that rope and let all that baggage go.
And I think it's also
move forward into a new life.
When you get into a new relationship, to realize that you did make mistakes yourself. I'm not saying when it comes to abuse, because I would say to anybody right now, we must say this: if you are in an abusive relationship of any kind, if you are being berated, put down, hit, anything that comes under the word of abuse, you need to really take a long, hard look at your life and get the hell out, because it will not change. And because if that person has to want to stop it, they have to want to change. And if they're not, whether it be female, whether it be male, whether it be family, whether it be relationship, you should need to get out. My brother is abusive. He's always been abusive. He will lose his temper, and when he drinks, he's even worse. I love my brother. I will always love my brother, but I haven't seen him since 2006, and I had to remove myself out of my brother's life because it was a more, my brother was such fun to be with, but when he turned, it was like, Jesus Christ, I got to get out of here. Like, it was, and you knew it was coming, and you could just see it. And it's like, I went into counseling to help people because I knew what it was like to feel out of control and not have that support. So when I ended up counseling men that did hit women, let me tell you, they're the most charming people on the planet. They don't, about 1 in 10 turns around and goes, I did this and I feel like the biggest piece of shit. Most of them are charming. Most of them were very easygoing to talk to. You would never think they were who they were. It's only when you start reading the history of because what my job was is if they were coming out of prison or if they were on probation, I would have the case studies, and my job was to talk to them to see, if we could stop this abuse cycle. And most of them were just like, no, it's not really like that. It isn't. And I sat there listening to them thinking, and they would turn a lot of it onto you, like, oh, you seem really lovely and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, and I've said this many times to people. One particular guy I had his history of what he'd done to people, what he'd done. And he sat there and denied everything. It's not true. It's not true. I never done any of that. And I was like, so you're saying that she's lying then? And he was like, yeah. And well, how did she get those injuries? How did that happen? Because if someone's, and it's the hardest thing to go to the police. It's the hardest thing to tell someone else I'm being abused, especially if you're a guy in some ways and it's happening to you, because guys are not supposed to happen to it, right?
Well, and Amy was like half my size. She could punch me all she wanted, and it might bruise my arm, but it's never going to do anything.
But they will believe you, especially with men. I mean, if men are being abused, it's hard for them to actually turn around and say, this is happening to me. Please take me seriously. And I think that it's the tide is turning now. But also in a family scenario, like my mum was, when my brother would go off on one, she'd hide all the knives in the house. She'd hide everything, and it was so awful to see my mother going through this. So it's been in my family, my mom.
But that's interesting because she experienced her mom throwing knives and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's logical that when she'd see your brother going off, that she would pack up all the knives and hide them away.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen my brother, pick my sister up literally like this and put her against the wall. And he's a big guy. And don't get me wrong, I don't talk about this to cuss him off or anything like that. We have nothing to do with each other. And I hope he has a very happy life. But it's like I saw some things I never want to see. And that's why I think when you go on with your life, when you move on with your life, you don't forget and you do carry it with you. And even though you move on and I've had relationships that weren't abusive, but it's still there. And it doesn't matter who I date from this point onward, if I end up marrying anyone else, it will always be there. And I will always be like, you really? You know?
Well, I think one of the main things that people that are in abusive relationships say, well, I can change him.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't.
No.
Nobody can change you but you.
But isn't that a very typical thing? You know, women want to change the men they love, and men expect women to stay the same as when they meet them and never change.
Well,
and
it's
so they
almost
don't understand
like
growth
those fairy
in life.
tales. It's almost like the fairy tale, you know, the big bad man is all, you know, what am I trying to say? Bewitched by the woman, and she completely changes him into this better person.
Curses and chants, yeah.
In reality, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think
they have to decide to change.
Yeah.
Want to change.
If you go with someone and they start cussing off their partners really, really badly, right? And they're like, she did this, or he did that, or he did this, and it's a list. And you're like, no, there's always two sides to every story. I always say this to people, there's always two sides, right? And you've got to take it on board, both of it. When you meet a new person, regardless of it, and you hear all these horror stories from the past, there's always two sides. But at the end of the day, it is wrong to raise your hand unless it's self-defense and they're coming at you with a knife or anything else like that, right? Because you've got to like put your hands up to protect yourselves. There is no reason why you should. You know, years ago, I slapped a guy around the face. He spoke to me really badly and I slapped him around the face. I felt dreadful afterwards. And I've always said, you know, and since then, even with after that situation, I never, ever raised my hand again, even when they were right in my face and having a go at me. I never did but inside I was like, you know, so I get it. But I think that reading through the stories tonight with this Scotty, I'm so glad that we chose this subject because it tends to show every one of us has had abuse of some kind. You know, reading Carlene's words and in you know, the fact that it was very much needed by so many. And you know, I'm very grateful to the lady who brought this subject to me and said, would you talk about it? And I think Scotty and I are actually thrilled that our show, because everyone's like, it's a really heavy subject, why would you talk about it? And it's like, because that's what we started Robertson for.
That is
to actually talk about things.
It's one of those things that people get embarrassed to talk about.
They do.
I know for so long I was embarrassed to admit that I allowed it to go on so long until I forgave myself and decided, okay, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
You know I am not quiet. So I take responsibility for, you know, my part, but I didn't do the same thing.
Right.
You know,
you're just an uppity woman.
I am.
So
I wasn't then as much as I am now.
Yeah.
But, you know, I didn't want to lose who I was. And I had people saying, you know, you're going to lose yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, that's crazy.
And sometimes do you think that we attach ourselves so closely to someone that we think, you say we don't want to lose ourselves. Sometimes we attach ourselves so closely to somebody that ourselves become the identity that's created with that person. Therefore, separating from them when they've done you harm becomes that much harder because you've attached yourself to them and let them become who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of people, I think, experience when they go through these situations. They are too attached to that person. Oh, he said he was sorry, and I love him so much. I can't wait to darn his socks and cook him pork chops. I mean, these are the things that, or the other way around too. And
well, I think that, and what I always say is, leaving my first husband, taking my kids and leaving was the hardest
sure,
thing I'd ever had to do, but it was also the best thing I'd ever done.
sure,
But it took me a while to get over it because I still felt married.
yeah.
You know,
I still
even
feel married, and we've been divorced for longer than we were married. So
yeah, and
You've been divorced
but
for
I
like 15 years.
yeah,
because that so many years, that's who I was.
Yeah.
You know, I was that one person for so long. You know, I kind of had to, you know, get who I am now in order to feel separate.
Michelle picks up on a good point about vulnerability. It is the hardest thing in the world to show vulnerability after you have been involved in a situation like that, because being vulnerable, it can be seen as a weakness by so many people. But being vulnerable is and when a dog shows you their belly, they're showing they're vulnerable, they're showing they trust you. So that's their way of showing you. But with a human being, it's like, how do you show your vulnerability? But I have to agree with Val. I thank him for what he did to me, because he made me a much stronger, kick-ass woman than I was before then. And I would not have got on a plane and gone to Canada without that kick to leave and start a new life. I wouldn't have met the people that are in my life now. I wouldn't have had the opportunities. I wouldn't be talking to you guys. I wouldn't have had everything. So in a way, I thank him for at least giving me that experience to become a stronger and a I would hope a better person that's helped other people from it. Do I still wish him any? Listen, you know, I don't want to wish bad karma on anyone, but you know, how about you, Scotty? How do you feel about
my ex? Well, like I said, rather tongue in cheek, she could fall off the planet and I'd dance a jig. I
see, and I'm the
opposite.
opposite.
Actual song is "She Could Fall Off the Planet and I'd Dance a Jig on Her Grave." It's an old Irish song, and so how I feel about her now, I still love her in my heart, but it's not somebody I would ever want to be with again. And of course, I wouldn't go seeking that from her now anyway. But she was somebody after Rainey and I were even married. And we didn't announce it. We had a very small wedding on the back.
But she was still messing with you.
She was messing with me. And she would write me. It was a week after Rainey and I got married. And she wrote me and said, or called me and said, "Have you ever considered reconciliation?" I said, "Sure, I've considered it." I said, but I said, keep in mind, I said, we have 3 kids we have to raise separately now. I said, reconciliation can take on many shapes and forms. And I said, that form of reconciliation that we need is one that is being friendly with each other and helpful for the purpose of raising our kids. That's not the answer she wanted.
No.
And so how I feel about her now is one of ambivalence. She's just another person out there, no longer somebody I need to deal with. How about you, Wendy? What have you experienced with?
Well,
how do you feel about?
I think maybe it would have been easier if they hadn't turned up a year and a half ago at where I live.
Sure.
And,
no. Bye. You got to go. I'll come and see him when we're done. You got to go. But I will when I come up.
And probably assaulted a very good friend of mine. I would have perhaps thought, and that I did bring the police in at that point. The police were called. It's now on record. I never put it on record years ago. I didn't, because you know what? I didn't even think at the time, no one's going to believe me. No one's going to believe me. You know, they're not. But now I look back and go, actually, I think they might have believed me, but I didn't, you know. So the second one I was in, and that was completely different. I could talk to this person for 13 hours a day. It was friendship. It was great.
Sure.
Brilliant. So when they lost their temper and glass was broken and I watched it go past my face, and it cut my throat slightly, just, you know, cut my throat, Nick, and I saw that glass go past my face. And I was told, you know, I was told something that to this day I don't think I'll ever get over. But it's like, I think those people come into our lives to teach us very good lessons, to change. I guess I am quite, the trauma is always there. The trauma is always there, and I don't care, you know. As I said, had they made a difference to change their lives and be different people, I'd have a lot of respect for them. For me, it's like I actually think maybe I've not come across Desert tonight, because this is a very strong subject for me, because I've counseled so many women, because I've seen, you know, I just don't understand, Scotty, and I never will. When you've hurt someone so deeply, why is it so easy to lie about it? When there's so much evidence that shows elsewise. Yeah. I actually remember his mother actually saying to me, "Why do you want to be with him? He's horrible. This is my son, and he's still horrible." And I was like, "You're not supposed to say that about your son." But I was young and younger. Sure. But now I think, Scotty, I'm so glad we tackled this. I'm so glad that we've brought this to attention.
And before you go much further, Uncle Dave and Val, we're going to say goodnight to you guys, because we're going to start wrapping this up. So both of you, thanks for being here. Val, thanks for being here. Your first time on here with us. So we'll see you later too. And so Wendy, I did want to wrap this up with you. I know it's getting quite late over there in London.
I just hope that
carry on with what you were saying.
I hope we've helped people, because we get a lot of people have said, "Oh, you pick dark, deep subjects," and it's like, well, a lot of people have said to me, "I watched your show, and you and Scotty, what you were talking about, I could really relate to, and it really made a difference." Yeah. And they don't always watch the show the night we do it; they watch it the day after. Mm-hmm. And I think that this afternoon I saw raw emotion in you, and it just goes to show that years later, yes, it is still there. And I wish I could take that pain from you. I really wish I could take that pain from all of us.
Don't say that stuff. That's where it's like, you know, you have something and it doesn't hurt until somebody you love says, "Oh, did that hurt?" And it rips it open. So, yeah. So, I don't even know. I don't know what to say.
I know it's, and thank you for everybody that's actually been really supportive and you know, supports the show and ask us what we want to look at, and if we can help anybody, then we are here as well. And we don't have all the answers, but we'll do our best.
Yes, Wendy, it's been wonderful. I mean, it's not a wonderful topic, but it's a good topic because we all need it.
Yeah.
And if you don't need it out there, somebody, you know, I don't want to say you're lucky, but you're either doing something right or you're lucky or you've done well, because most people run into these things, and learning how to deal with them, learning how to deal with the people that are the instigators of these things in our lives, that's a tough row. And when you come out of it, on the other end, you either are resilient and you move, or you drag some of that with you and you've got to learn to overcome it.
Well, we're not victims, baby. We're warriors.
Ain't that the truth? I said to you today, I said, I am no victim, and I will never play a victim.
No.
That doesn't mean shit hasn't happened. It means I'm not going to be a victim over it.
And
there's lessons to learn.
That we pick up again, right? Because it seems to be, quite emotive. But I'm so glad we tackled it, because you and I were thinking about it earlier on. We're like, shall we? How do we do this? How
should we tackle this? Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. All right.
I love you.
I love you too. And we will talk a little later. So, folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this show with us and this conversation with us. You mean a lot to us. We appreciate the fact that you'd give us your time, spend it here for now almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
So we will see you next time. And in the meantime, a couple of other places in between. So we'll see you later. Live long, to move, and prosper.